The massive windows of the Celestial Horizons Academy stretched like endless mirrors, reflecting countless alien shapes moving through the grand corridors. Students from 100 different worlds pushed and shuffled, their strange bodies moving in ways both familiar and completely foreign. Among them, one figure stood out, not because she was loud or colorful, but because she was so remarkably ordinary. Eunji Park was small, not tiny, but the kind of average height that made people look right past her. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her academy uniform crisp and perfectly pressed. While other students wore complicated gear that glimmered or shifted colors, her outfit was plain, basic, forgettable. But her eyes were different. They were the kind of eyes that didn't just look. They observed. They calculated. They remembered everything. The Academy's main hall was a showcase of galactic diversity. Crystalline beings from Andoria shifted and sparkled like living gems. Vexnar telepaths communicated through subtle color changes in their transparent skin. Silicon-based Krelltalk moved with mechanical precision, their rocky bodies clicking and grinding with each step. And then there was Unji, just a human. The last human in the Advanced Strategic Warfare program. Another human, a Krelltalk student, muttered loud enough for her to hear. Its rocky body vibrated with what might have been laughter. How did you even get admission here? Eunji didn't respond. She didn't need to. The classroom was a marvel of technology. Holographic displays danced around students, showing complex battle simulations from across the galaxy. Alien languages mixed and merged, creating a background noise that would have overwhelmed most humans. But not Unji. She sat quietly, her datapad open, absorbing information faster than anyone realized. Professor Vaxlor, a 7-tentacled instructor from the gas planet Nimbara, began the day's lecture. His translation device converted his native language into clear, precise human English. Today, he announced, his tentacles moving in complex patterns, we will discuss strategic adaptation in multi-species conflict scenarios. Most students leaned forward, their various sensory organs alert. Eunji simply opened a small notebook. An actual paper notebook, something so old-fashioned that it made several alien students laugh quietly. The Andorian next to her, a crystalline being named Kirazex, leaned over. Still using paper. Primitive, she whispered, her translucent body reflecting the classroom's blue lights. Eunji didn't look up. She just kept writing. What the other students didn't know was that her notebook contained something special. Generations of military strategy, passed down through her family. Notes from conflicts they'd survived. Tactics that had saved humanity when the odds were impossible. The lecture continued. Complex battle strategies flew across holographic displays. Quantum computing models showed potential war scenarios. Predictive algorithms mapped out potential galactic conflicts. Eunji listened and remembered. Outside the classroom window, stars moved. Entire civilizations lived and died in the darkness between those points of light. Humanity was just one of them. Small, often overlooked, frequently underestimated. But not forgotten. Never forgotten. As Professor Vaxlor's lecture reached its peak, explaining how most species approached strategic warfare, Eunji's pen continued to move. Slow, steady, precise. She was writing her own story. And no one, not the Krelltalk, not the Andorians, not even the professor, knew what was coming. The historical warfare lecture hall buzzed with anticipation. Hundreds of students from different star systems packed the circular room, holographic displays flickering around them. Each seat was a marvel of technology. Adaptive cushions that adjusted to whatever species sat upon them. Professor Vaxlor's tentacles moved across the central control panel. With a simple gesture, he brought up a timeline of galactic conflicts. Massive battles between advanced civilizations flickered in miniature. Entire star systems reduced to blinking dots of light. But something was different today. A Krelltalk admiral in training named Zork stood up. His rocky body gleamed under the lecture hall's lights. His voice was loud, confident, mocking. Humans, Zork announced, his translation device making his words crisp and clear, are nothing more than a primitive species. How did they even survive long enough to join the galactic community? Laughter rippled through the classroom. Andorian crystals chimed. Vexnar telepaths shifted colors in amusement. Even the mechanical Krelltalk vibrated with what passed for their version of laughter. Yunji sat still. Her datapad was open. Her fingers moved quietly. Professor Vaxlor looked uncomfortable. He knew the history. But saying too much could be dangerous. The galaxy had its secrets. Humanity was one of them. Zork continued his mockery. Look at their early history. Wars, pollution, conflicts over tiny pieces of land. How could such a species ever become space-capable? Something clicked on Yunji's datapad. A holographic projection erupted in the center of the lecture hall. Massive. Unexpected. The laughter died instantly. Historical footage began to play. Not the carefully edited versions most knew. This was raw. Real. Unfiltered. The screen showed humanity's darkest hour. The Galactic hegemony invasion. A coalition of advanced civilizations that had decided Earth was nothing more than a resource to be harvested. Primitive. Weak. They were wrong. The footage showed human resistance fighters. Not with advanced weapons. Not with impossible technology. But with something far more dangerous. Creativity. Determination. An impossible ability to adapt. Zork's rocky body went completely still. Human soldiers used old vehicles, repurposed farm equipment. Communication systems cobbled together from spare parts. They fought against ships that could destroy entire continents with a single shot. And they won, not through superior technology, but through something the hegemony never understood. Human spirit. The video showed tactical movements that defied every known rule of warfare. Strategies that made no sense until they worked perfectly. Attacks that came from impossible angles. Defense systems created from nothing. One scene showed a group of resistance fighters using an old mining laser, normally used to cut rock, to disable a massive hegemony battleship. Another showed communication systems built from radio parts older than most alien civilizations. Yunji's finger had been moving on her datapad the entire time. She had accessed classified archives, footage that was supposed to be locked away forever. The lecture hall was silent now. Zork's confident stance had vanished. The other students stared in shock. Humans weren't just survivors. They were something else entirely. Professor Vaxlor cleared his throat. It seems, he said carefully, that we might need to review some historical records. Yunji closed her datapad. Just another student. Nothing special. But the look in her eyes told a different story. The galaxy had forgotten, but she would make sure they remembered. The lecture hall buzzed with tension after Yunji's historic video display. Zork, the Krelltalk admiral in training, stood frozen. His rocky body seemed to have turned to actual stone. Yunji packed her datapad carefully. She didn't look at anyone, didn't celebrate, didn't do anything to draw attention. But attention found her anyway. The Academy's senior administrator, a tall Vexnar named Kirill, approached her table. His transparent skin shifted colors, a sign of intense thought among his species. Cadet Park, Kirill said, his voice calm but tight. You have created quite a situation. Yunji looked up, said nothing. Zork recovered first. This changes nothing, he announced to the room. One historical recording doesn't prove anything about human capabilities. Something flickered in Yunji's eyes. It was gone so fast that most would have missed it. But Kirill saw, and he understood something was about to happen. I challenge you, Yunji said suddenly. Her voice was soft, clear, precise. The room went quiet. A strategic simulation, she continued. Me against the top 5 students from different species, using only historical human battle strategies and limited resources. Zork laughed. It sounded like rocks grinding together. You want to prove human superiority through a simple simulation. Not superiority, Yunji corrected. Understanding. The academy administrators whispered among themselves. This was unprecedented. A single human challenging the top students. Impossible, but also intriguing. Carol stepped forward. The terms, he asked. Yunji pulled up a detailed proposal on her datapad. The holographic display showed a complex battle simulation environment. Limitations, rules, conditions that seemed both simple and incredibly complex. Standard galactic warfare simulation protocols, she said, but with a twist. I'll use only historical human strategies. No advanced alien technologies. No quantum computing. Just pure strategy. The other students looked confused, excited, angry. The Andorian named Kirazix stepped forward. Her crystal body reflected the room's lights in complex patterns. I accept, she said. Someone needs to teach this human a lesson. 2 more students joined. A telepathic Vexnar named Lyra, a quantum-enhanced Zornak named Krell. Each believed they would easily defeat the human. They did not know what was coming. The Academy's main simulation chamber was a marvel of technology. Massive holographic displays, quantum computing systems that could model entire galactic conflicts in milliseconds, adaptive environments that changed based on strategic decisions. Yunji carried only a small bag. Inside, a paper notebook, a simple datapad, a few old-fashioned memory chips. Are you sure about this? Carol asked her quietly. Failure means removal from the academy. Yunji looked up. Her eyes held something dangerous, something the administrators would soon understand. Some stories, she said softly, are written in blood and determination, not technology. The simulation was about to begin. And the galaxy was about to learn something about humanity. A lesson written in strategy, in survival, in an ability to turn the impossible into reality. The simulation chamber was huge. Massive holographic displays covered every wall. Floating platforms held the 5 competing students. Yunji stood on the smallest platform, right in the center. The other students looked confident, too confident. Kiradas, the Andorian, had her crystal body linked to 3 separate quantum computing systems. Complex algorithms danced around her, predicting battle movements faster than any organic brain could process. Lyra, the Vexnar telepath, connected her mind to a neural network that could simulate millions of potential scenarios each second. Her transparent skin flickered with calculation patterns. Krell, the Zornak, used an advanced predictive AI that could model entire war strategies in microseconds. His mechanical body was literally built for strategic warfare. And then there was Zork, the Krell-Tok who had mocked humans earlier. His rocky body was connected to a defense grid that had never been breached in any previous simulation. Yunji had a simple datapad, a notebook, and something else the others couldn't see. Her eyes. Simulation begins in 3, 2, 1. The Academy's AI announced. The battlefield materialized. A complex star system with multiple planets, limited resources, strategic objectives that seemed impossible to achieve. Most students would attack immediately, push forward with technology, use their advanced systems to crush opponents quickly. Yunji did something different. She waited. Her first move was no move at all. While the other students began deploying massive fleet formations, she studied, watched, analyzed. The simulation's first hour passed. Kiradetics had already conquered 2 minor planets. Lyra had established complex communication networks. Krell had positioned defensive satellites around key resource points. Zork laughed. His rocky body vibrated with what passed for amusement among his species. The human does nothing, he announced to the observers. But those watching closely noticed something strange. Yunji was writing, constantly writing in her notebook. Her datapad showed seemingly random data points, connections that made no sense to the advanced alien technology around her. Suddenly, she moved. It was like watching water flow. Not a harsh attack, not a direct assault, but a movement that seemed to work around the other player's strategies. She used an old Earth strategy called asymmetric warfare. Not fighting where the enemy was strong, but finding their weakest points. Her first attack came from an impossible angle. A small fleet, nothing compared to the massive ships of her opponents, moved through a narrow asteroid field. The other students' advanced systems couldn't track it, because it moved like something alive, not like a machine. Kiradzex's quantum systems began to glitch. Lyra's neural network started showing unexpected interference. Krell's predictive AI couldn't map the humans' movements. They were fighting something they didn't understand. Human creativity. The first hour became 2, then 3. The simulation's observers began to lean forward. Something was happening that had never happened before. Yunji wasn't just playing the game. She was rewriting the rules. The simulation entered its 6th hour. The observation deck was packed. Academy leaders from a dozen different species watched in total silence. Something impossible was happening. Yunji's small fleet moved like water. No predictable pattern. No standard attack formation. Just constant fluid movement that seemed to break every known rule of strategic warfare. Kiradzex's perfect defense grid began to crack. The Andorian's crystal body flickered with confusion. Her quantum systems showed something that made no sense. Yunji wasn't attacking where she was strong. She was attacking where the systems were weakest. That's not possible, Kiradzex muttered. Her defensive satellites started to fail, not through direct assault, but through something more dangerous. Yunji was finding the tiny gaps, the smallest weakness, places so small that no advanced AI would even notice them. Lyra, the Vexnar telepath, tried to use her mental network to predict Yunji's moves. Normally, this worked perfectly. Telepathic abilities combined with advanced computing could map out every possible strategy. But human thinking didn't work like other species. Lyra's mental connections began to break down. The human strategy was so unpredictable that it created mental static, like trying to hear a whisper in a hurricane. Krell's predictive AI started to smoke. Actual smoke came from his computing systems. The Zornak looked shocked. His mechanical body couldn't process what was happening. Zork watched in horror. The Krelltok's rocky body began to crack. His defensive systems, which had never been breached in any previous simulation, started to fall apart. Not through brute force, but through something more subtle. Psychological warfare. Yunji wasn't just attacking systems. She was attacking how those systems thought. Her small fleet moved between asteroid fields, used gravity wells in ways no standard military training would ever consider, turned limitations into advantages, transformed weakness into strength. The Academy's main screen showed the battle progress, colored lines and dots that represented fleets and resources. Most observers could read these displays easily, but Yunji was doing something different. She was reading the spaces between the lines. Her notebook was filled with calculations, not just numbers, but something more. Understanding. The kind of deep understanding that comes from generations of survival. One by one, the other students' systems began to fail. Kiradzex's defense grid collapsed first. Her crystal body shimmered with total defeat. The Andorian's perfect mathematical approach had been destroyed by something that made no mathematical sense. Lyra's mental network went dark. The Vexnar telepath looked like she had been hit by a mental tsunami. Everything she understood about strategy had been turned upside down. Krell's AI system completely shut down. Smoke continued to rise from his computing platforms. The Zornak's mechanical body seemed to slump in defeat. Zork was the last to fall. His rocky body cracked, not from a direct hit, but from the total breakdown of everything he believed about warfare. The simulation ended. Complete silence filled the observation deck. Yunji put down her notebook. She hadn't moved much, hadn't shouted, hadn't done anything dramatic. She had just won. The Academy's main hall was quiet. Too quiet. News traveled fast in the Galactic community. But this news moved like a shockwave. A single human cadet had destroyed the top 5 strategic minds in a single simulation. Kirill, the Vexnar senior administrator, studied the simulation recordings. Again and again, his transparent skin changed colors rapidly, a sign of deep thinking among his species. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. But it did make sense, and that was the problem. Investigators began to dig. They wanted to understand how Yunji had done what she did. Her background became a target of intense research. The first reports came back quickly. Her family history was unusual. Her grandmother had been a key strategist during the hegemony resistance. Her grandfather was a communication expert who had helped design breakthrough tactical systems during humanity's darkest hour. Her parents were historians who specialized in unconventional warfare. But it was more than just family history. The investigators found something deeper, a pattern that ran through human history, a way of thinking that most advanced civilizations couldn't understand. Humans didn't just fight wars. They survived them. Each historical conflict had taught humanity something. Adaptation wasn't just a skill. It was a way of life. When standard methods failed, humans found new ways. When technology wasn't enough, they used creativity. The Academy's research team pulled every record they could find: old Earth conflicts, resistance movements, survival stories from different parts of human history. They discovered something shocking. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology. It wasn't raw power. It was the ability to turn weakness into strength, to find solutions where others saw only problems. Zork, the Krell-Tak who had first mocked Yunji, now sat in a review chamber. His rocky body looked defeated, broken. "How?" he asked the investigation team. "How could one human do this?" The lead investigator, a calm Andorian researcher, looked at him carefully. "She didn't just use strategy," the researcher explained. "She understood something deeper. Warfare isn't about winning. It's about surviving." More reports came in. Other academies wanted to see the simulation recordings. Military leaders from different star systems requested detailed analysis. Yunji remained unchanged. She attended classes, took notes, didn't celebrate her victory, didn't do anything special. But everyone was watching her now. The Galactic community had a new question. Who were humans really? What else didn't they know? Her notebook, the simple paper notebook that seemed so outdated, became an object of intense study. Researchers tried to understand what made it special, what secrets it might hold. But Yunji kept writing, kept learning, kept moving forward. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was just being herself. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. The universe was learning. Slowly, carefully. That humanity was something more than they had ever imagined. One small cadet, one impossible simulation, one moment that would change everything. Yunji's small apartment was nothing special. A single room, simple furniture, walls covered with old photographs and hand-drawn maps. Most of the photos were of her family. Not fancy pictures, just simple moments captured in time. Her grandmother sat in one photo, an old woman with hard eyes. She wore a military uniform from the hegemony resistance period. Something about her smile told a story of survival. Yunji kept looking at the photo, remembering stories. Her grandmother had told her about the invasion, how humanity faced an enemy that could destroy entire planets with a single shot, how they had nothing. No advanced technology, no special weapons, just determination. The apartment's small computer system hummed quietly. Classified files about her family history flickered on the screen. Most were marked with high security stamps, information that most people would never see. Her grandfather's research notes covered another wall. Complex diagrams, communication system designs, ways to send messages when everything was broken. A knock came at the door. Kirill, the Vexnar senior administrator, stood outside. His transparent body shifted colors, showing multiple emotions at once. "May I come in?" he asked. Yoon-ji stepped back, allowed him to enter. The administrator looked around the small room. His eyes caught every detail. The photos, the maps, the old research notes. "Your family," he said slowly, "is not what it seems." Yoon-ji said nothing, just waited. Carol pulled up a holographic display. Generations of her family history appeared, not just military records, life stories, survival stories. Her great-grandfather had survived 3 different planetary conflicts. Her aunt had developed communication systems that worked when all other technology failed. Her parents were historians who studied resistance movements. "Your entire family," Carol explained, "has been preparing for something." But what? Yoon-ji's eyes held a depth that made the administrator uncomfortable. She wasn't just a student. She was a living history book. "Survival," she said simply. "We learn. We adapt. We move forward." The administrator recognized something dangerous in those words. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. More information appeared on the holographic display. Her family had a pattern. Always at the edge of major conflicts, always finding ways to survive when others thought it was impossible. The simulation was just one more example. "Your grandmother," Carol said, pointing to the photo, led a resistance group that survived against impossible odds. She turned farming equipment into weapons, used communication systems built from radio parts. Yoon-ji nodded. "She always said innovation comes from limitation." The room felt different now. Not just a simple student apartment, but a museum of human survival. Maps showed conflict zones, old communication designs, survival techniques that broke every known military rule. Carol understood something important. Humanity wasn't just a species. It was a living, breathing system of adaptation. "You're not just a student," he said quietly. "You're a continuation of something bigger." Yoon-ji looked at her grandmother's photo again, said nothing. But her eyes told a different story. The galaxy was about to learn something important. Humanity was just getting started. The invitation came without warning. Yoon-ji found it on her datapad one morning. Simple text, no fancy holograms, no special effects, just words that would change everything. "Galactic Strategic Council requests your presence." Most students would have celebrated, jumped around, told everyone they knew. Yoon-ji did none of those things. She simply packed a small bag, checked her notes, prepared carefully. The council's meeting hall was massive. Floating platforms held representatives from hundreds of different species. Some looked like living crystals. Some were made of pure energy. Some were so alien that human eyes could barely understand their shape. Yoon-ji was the only human. She wore a simple uniform, no medals, no special decorations, just the basic academy outfit. The head of the council was a being from the gas planet Nimbara. 6 tentacles, eyes that could see in multiple spectrums. When it spoke, the entire hall went quiet. "Cadet Park," the being said, "your simulation has changed everything we understand about strategic warfare." Yoon-ji waited, said nothing. Representatives from different star systems studied her. The Andorian delegation, the Vexnar research teams, the Kreltok military advisors, all watched carefully. They offered her things: research positions, military consultancies, diplomatic roles that no human had ever been given before. But something was different about these offers. They weren't trying to control her. They were trying to understand her. The Nimbaran council leader pulled up holographic displays. Her simulation, her family history, every detail of her strategic approach. "You have shown us," the leader explained, "that technology is not the same as strategy. That survival is more important than power." More offers came. A position at the most advanced military academy in the galaxy. Research funding. The chance to study with the best strategic minds from 100 different worlds. Zork, the Kreltok who had first mocked her, now sat in the council chamber. His rocky body looked different. Smaller. Humbled. "We misunderstood humans," he said quietly. The entire hall heard him. Eunji's family history became a subject of intense study, not just her military background, but how her family had survived, how they had turned weakness into strength. The council offered her something more than a job. They offered understanding. "We want to learn," the Nimbaran leader said. "Not control, not dominate. Learn." Eunji looked at the assembled representatives, saw something she had never seen before. Respect. Not fear, not anger. Pure respect. The offers kept coming, but she knew something they didn't. This was just the beginning. Humanity had survived impossible things before. This was just another step. One small cadet, one impossible simulation, one moment that would change how the galaxy saw an entire species. The room was silent, waiting. Eunji picked up her datapad, started taking notes. The galaxy watched and waited to see what she would do next. The observation deck of Celestial Horizons Academy stretched out like a glass window to the universe. Stars moved slowly, planets drifted in the distance. Entire galaxies existed in the darkness between pinpoints of light. Eunji stood alone. Her small bag was packed. The same bag she had brought to the simulation. The same simple notebook still tucked inside. Nothing special. Everything special. Other students watched her from a distance. The ones who had mocked her. The ones who had challenged her. Now they looked different. Careful. Respectful. Kirill, the Vexnar administrator, approached her quietly. "What will you do now?" he asked. Eunji looked out at the stars. "Learn," she said simply. Her family's history wasn't just about fighting. It was about understanding, about seeing what others could not see. The simulation had changed everything. But she knew this was just the beginning. Reports were already spreading, across star systems, through communication networks, faster than light itself. A human had done the impossible. Not through technology, not through power, but through something more dangerous. Thinking differently. Her grandmother's lessons came back to her. Stories of resistance, of survival, of turning nothing into something. One small story could change everything. The Academy's main display showed her full record now. Not just the simulation, but everything that came before. Her family's history, her own small achievements. Zork, the Krelltalk who had first mocked her, now stood nearby. His rocky body looked different. Smaller. Humbled. "We were wrong about humans," he said quietly. Eunji didn't celebrate, didn't argue. Just listened. The galactic community was learning. Slowly, carefully, that humanity was something more than they had ever imagined. Her datapad blinked with new messages, offers from research teams, military academies, diplomatic missions, things no human had ever been offered before. But she knew something important. This was just one story. Humanity had more stories to tell. The observation deck was quiet. Stars moved slowly outside. Entire civilizations lived and died in the darkness between those points of light. Humanity was just one of them. Small, often overlooked, frequently underestimated, but never forgotten. Kirill watched her carefully. "What do humans want?" he asked. Eunji looked at him. Her eyes held something dangerous, something powerful. "To understand," she said. "To learn. To move forward." The stars moved outside. Galaxies spun in their endless dance. Humanity was just getting started. One small cadet, one impossible simulation, one moment that would change everything. The universe waited, and Eunji kept writing.